I can't actually see it.
Do you want my glasses?
Nah. Will someone
I'll
else
read
read
it.
it? Sorry, I'll bring my glasses next time.
Jonathan.
Sorry.
It's all good. All right, here we go. Kia ora koutou, and welcome to Lunch on the Way. We're three guys doing theology over lunch, and sometimes we'll do that with others. We want to warn you, though, that what's said here is not yet complete, because like any good conversation, you never want it to end, so join us for Lunch on the Way. Jonathan's laughing right now because he couldn't read that intro because
I'm getting so old.
he's getting so old, so I had to read it for him.
I was going to lend him my glasses, but he didn't want to pick it up.
No.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to today and this, whatever this is, conversation with three guys doing theology. Basically it. And man, what do we talk about today?
This was a doozy.
It was.
This conversation was a doozy.
It was
What did we talk
hefty,
about?
man.
We started off with talking about flourishing,
Yeah.
and didn't take us. It took us pretty. We went there pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like as you sort of said, Joey, you had this sort of kind of in your mind. You were kind of very not you weren't reluctant. You were very forward in saying, "This is really wrong. I know it's wrong, but this is what I think about." And we began to unpack what we thought flourishing was, and I think you kind of.
And then I
helped
got
us lead
caught
us.
in the weeds. I felt like I had a machete and I was just digging through the jungle. But I think we finally, is this right? I think we finally ended up in some open space.
Yeah, I was like, we realized we were defining flourishing without defining the playing field for flourishing. Meaning, we realized that, okay, I'm giving this away, sorry. But we realized that, okay, we're actually having two very different conversations around what flourishing is.
Yeah.
That can be both Christian in a popular sense, but is it more of a secular Christian ideal of flourishing, or is it more of a kingdom of God ideal of flourishing?
Yeah.
And those two are not the same.
Yeah.
So which one are you kind of living towards and wanting to, I guess, not manifest, fully embody?
Yeah.
Is kind of the thought. But I gave you some warnings, though. Whoever's listening is that it's a slow burn at the beginning, about 5 minutes to really get into it. But I'll tell you what Jonathan's got a thought that just kicks us off, and we just go hard, and we get somewhere that is semi-satisfying, but at least it leads to more and more questions. Yeah. So with that being said, this is the third conversation posted, I believe. So I don't know how I'm going to do this, whether it's in the description of the podcast. I don't know. We actually haven't uploaded anything, published anything yet, but we've at least done, this is the third one we've done. So if you want to be a part of this conversation, we would love to hear from you. So if you're listening to this right now, congratulations, you've now listened to 3 of these episodes.
Wow.
So you are a dedicated listener.
We need your feedback. We need your help.
We don't want your money. We just want your feedback.
Get involved with this conversation.
So I will have something in the description of this podcast or wherever you find this to email.
Yeah.
And we would love to hear your thoughts on the previous one. Maybe over the course of episodes or conversations moving forward, we'll actually read out what you say. And
we won't say your name.
We won't say your name unless you want us to.
anonymous.
If you want us to say your name, we'll say your name. But we don't have to.
Yeah.
However, we want you to be a part of the conversation too. We would love to hear your thoughts on where you might land with where we kind of fumbly land along the way.
We'll eat anything. We'll chew on anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have anything for lunch.
We're omnivores over here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with that being said, feel free to click that subscribe button, all that fun stuff. That it's not YouTube, it's a podcast. And write a review if you've made it this far. Write a review because it does help this podcast be known out there in the algorithm world of podcasting. And if you think this is helpful or for others, just share it along. We just have fun. If you don't want to listen to it, you don't have to, but you're obviously listening to it now, so come join us.
And you may have a question. Often these conversations, they prod the ground, which opens the ground, a bit like a plough. It turns over the soil, which opens the space more. So you may have a question, which we weren't thinking about, but may be helpful in prodding us a little bit further to think a bit more deeply. So, yeah.
If you want us to talk about something, and then you want to add your own 2 cents into the conversation, we might read it out there too. So you're like a fourth person around the table.
Awesome.
Who knows? We'll see what happens. This is all one mass experiment we're going to commit to for a year, and we'll see what comes from it. But anyway, enjoy the conversation. So we talked about liturgical anthropology, and we talked about how everyone has a liturgy around, like, okay, we're all liturgical people, formative, and we did a tangent on that. And then we started talking about the ideal liturgy for the ideal formation process for a
gosh,
Christian.
that was hard.
That was tough.
That was real tough.
We got stumped.
Yeah, we
That's
did.
real hard.
We did.
So then we ended it there, and I did end it there.
Yeah.
But then you brought up we really need to think about something deeper,
Right.
which is, what does it mean to be a flourishing human?
Oh, really?
That was,
Oh,
what does it mean?
Sounds like
Just
you don't-
dropping us in it.
What does it mean to flourish is the question that you asked.
Who knows? Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
Did I?
You did.
Oh, man.
So now it's
I
your
don't know.
responsibility to pick us
I
up.
have no idea.
Jonathan's really in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what?
Yeah, okay.
Those moments
Who
are
would-
kind of unveiling moments.
Who
And
would
when
be
it's gone,
foolish
it's gone.
enough to say that?
Yeah, so Jonathan. Okay, so when I think of flourishing, I think of self-help.
Okay.
And I know that's not a good image, but that's the first thing that comes to mind, because we're addressing, okay, so liturgical anthropology. What does it mean to be human? We're really trying to answer the question of what does it mean to flourish in the world, to flourish as human, as God has created you to be, is essentially what we're asking.
Yeah.
And obviously there's some variety within that, because everyone's created different and equal but different.
Yeah.
But there's still like a meta, macro humanness that everybody is called to embody, right? So when I think of flourishing, I think of, how to self-actualize yourself.
Whoa.
Which is not, it's a very secular way of looking at it, and it's very much like let's take a little bit from here, take a little bit from there, and let's see what we got. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's really good to talk about this, because the word flourishing becomes quite hip, and do I ever get sick of the cliches that get thrown around, and we just say it and we don't really know what we mean? So I think it can easily default to the kind of secular individual idea. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'd like to sort of push into that notion of flourishing. It must have something to do with human interaction and human relationships. Mm-hmm. So I'd be wanting to think a little bit around that to flourish as a human being. And because to be a human being is to be a social being.
Right.
So as a social being, these relationships, we certainly know when relationships are dysfunctional, that doesn't look like flourishing by any means. It's anger, unforgiveness, resentment, animosity. You feel it when you walk in a room. There's factions, all of that. So flip the other way, in terms of flourishing in human relationships, would be a generosity, humility, a vulnerability, a being known, being loved.
Yeah. Man, big question, eh? It's such a big question. I mean, instantly I think of, like, was it Irenaeus? The glory of God as a human being fully alive. That little kind of quote. And when I think of flourishing, I don't automatically think of self-help, strangely enough.
That's how jaded I am.
Yeah. And I actually don't even think of the individual person. When I think of flourishing, I think of environments.
Yeah.
Because there's no way a human being can flourish if the environment itself isn't set up in such a way that the human being can flourish in that environment. So that's where I tend to think. Do our cultures, do our actual physical environments set us up to be flourishing human beings? I think that's where I would begin the conversation. Institutions, are they places where human beings can flourish? And then I guess that comes back to the question, what is it to be a human being? That we can flourish.
Yeah, and then you get to the question of what is it? Because you're really getting to your favorite question, Jonathan, which is the what is the good?
What is the good?
Because you got to, like, we need, in order to define what does it look like to flourish, you've got to have a direction you're aiming towards, which ideally would be your definition of what the good is.
Right.
Because that's what you want to actualize within yourself that defines what flourishing is.
Yeah.
So obviously, if we're thinking archetypally with that language, Jesus, what is the archetype of humanity?
Yep.
He's the imprint, You know, he's the stamp.
Right.
So if he's that, then are we all supposed to be Jesus? Is that what it looks like to flourish? But then how do you...
Yeah.
This
is really interesting.
I'd like to take your idea, because I think that the word itself is an interesting one. Because when you said about, you were talking about environment. When I think of flourish, it's usually associated with a vegetation, a flower,
Right, yeah.
garden.
Gardens, yeah.
So that takes me to the notion of creation,
Yep.
which I think is quite a nice starting point.
Yep.
So creation, and it's so if we were to think of the Genesis narrative, there is this picture of flourishing. There's abundance. There's harmony. There's life. There's an overflow. Flow is another word.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's where it sort of took me, the notion of flourishing as I think of it as a word. It's a word that's not necessarily an idea. It creates an image of a vegetation creation image.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. How does that sit with your self-help, man? Does it work with it?
That just shows how jaded
push
I
back
am.
on
I
it?
think I'm wrong.
You might be right.
No, I don't think I'm right.
Right.
I know I'm not right. Like I'm convinced I'm not right.
I appreciate you putting it out there then.
No,
It's awesome.
I'm just saying that's my gut reaction to flourishing is like I think and this is actually a bit of a deeper issue. Maybe I'm just the only one who thinks like this, but I think a lot of people
We'll soon tell you.
We'll soon tell you. I think a lot of people when they look to the church as a way of, I don't think that the average person who calls himself a believer in Christ looks to the church as a way of what it means to be human, or a way of forming you into what it means to be human.
Yes.
I don't think that's actually that's actually right. So what I think it is, and I think it's an inheritance from maybe a more of an American understanding of consumeristic Christianity, is, well, the church is there to serve me, for me to be a better me. At a very, but they might not be conceived as for me to fully realize what it means to be human.
Yeah.
It might be more like for me to understand how I can function better in my job, which is, see, I'm even saying this and I'm like, I'm kind of getting close to what we're supposed to do, but it's almost like a shadow of it, where it's like you just want help to get from point A to point B, but really point A to point B is just like a small thing in the whole grand scheme of what your life really ought to be pointing towards or becoming. So that's the reason why I come from like the self-help thing, where it's like I think a lot of people see it as like, what was that quote? Therapeutic deism. Is right. A lot of people approach Christianity like that, where it's like, oh, it's therapeutic. It helps me, makes me feel better about myself. That God's there somewhere, and that I just gotta basically say a few prayers, and then I'm in and attend church, and I'm in. I think that's the self-help end of why I think of the word flourishing, because if I use the word flourishing in that context, it really sounds consumeristic, and like I'm just like any other secular person in the spiritual marketplace wanting to grab things to make me more of who I really am inside. You know, and that's why I said flourishing initially. I don't know that's why I'm like, no, I'm wrong.
Right.
And I'm okay with being wrong. I'm wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you are. I don't think you are.
No,
I don't think so, and I can't figure out why you're not at the moment. But let me just put something else out there. I'm just, when I'm here listening to you, like you're saying before, you said there needs to be a goal. There needs to be a goal, right? Yeah. And so I just thinking around that language, I'm wondering if there is actually a goal. I wonder if flourishing doesn't have a model. So let me just unpack that. I don't think there's an end goal. There's no B to get to. So if we're at A, there's no B to get to. Because what I think we get for flourishing, especially when you look at the Bible, you get some tips, if I can put it like that. If you think about the Ten Commandments, the Sermon on the Mount, you get some tips about what life looks like when it's going well, but you don't get a perfect picture. You get some ways to participate in flourishing. And then it's up to us. And I think the reason we get this is because there's a huge amount of freedom involved here, that you get some ways that life would look like. These things need to be involved if you want to live a good life, if you want to live a flourishing life. If you go against this, you're going to find out that you're not flourishing. But here's some things that you should do if you want to live a flourishing life. Now, what that looks like, how you implement those things, is up to you. You are free to live how you want to live. One will lead to flourishing, one will not lead to flourishing. But you're involved in this. There isn't a goal to get to, because flourishing is never about a goal. Flourishing is about living well.
But you've just undermined the whole question.
Yeah, do it. How did I do it?
You've just undermined it, because...
How did I do that?
Then what's flourishing? If it's not a goal, it's not something you get to. But you said in the Bible, there's you get glimpses of what it is.
Yeah.
But you don't see it completely fulfilled or lived out of what a flourishing life looks like, unless you get to Jesus, which is the basic assumption of he is the archetype of what it means to be human in a philosophical perspective. So then, he is flourishing.
No.
So what are you saying?
No. See, okay, this is really good, because it's starting to unpacking my thinking here and trying to get me to what I'm trying to say is, and I think what I'm trying to say is, Jesus is not a goal. He's a relationship. We're not after Jesus. That's not our goal as Christians. What we're after is entering back into our relationship with God. So I think there's a distinction to be made here between a goal of flourishing and being in a relationship that is then allowed to flourish. I think those are two separate things, and I can't figure out for the life of me how to kind of parse that apart for us, but I feel like there's something there. There's something to be had there.
I was thinking about this, is that, so flourishing is much more, the thing is, what we do is we reduce it to a something.
Yeah.
And actually, when we do that, we've actually, if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm trying to feed back,
Yeah.
is that we end up reducing it to the something that it's not.
Yeah.
So I was in a breakfast this morning, and we were talking about Proverbs. So, it's Proverbs. So Proverbs is a really interesting thing, because Proverbs is like, they're contextual. Because they contradict each other. One's saying this, and the other one's saying that. They conflict. So we were talking about the fact that it's a contextual space. They all of them make sense in the right context. So therefore, it throws this space. It creates the space in which there's a dynamic.
Yeah.
So maybe flourishing is, this is really subtle and hard to get at, because because we're naming something, but it's much more about. It's much more. It's more dynamic. It's in a space.
Yeah.
Rather than as a thing. It is this or it is that. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a different. There's not a goal, but it's a different posture towards things, which is what I'm really kind of after here.
So if you took Jesus and asked that question, because you're saying what you just said could be misunderstood. Like, I thought we were all following Jesus,
right? Yeah,
but
we don't want to misquote what you just said.
No, and I don't think you were.
I don't even know what I said. What did I say? Yeah,
but it was sort of the notion that we're not trying to be like Jesus. I think you said that, which is not what quite you were saying. It's like when we look at the Gospels, well, we can't really be like Jesus in the sense that he lived in a certain context in a Greco-Roman world.
Yeah.
But we learn something about the way or his making. I like the word making. The way in which he postured himself.
Yeah.
The way he postured himself towards relationships.
Yep.
So if we were to follow exactly he did this, it wouldn't work, would it?
Yeah, right.
So it's a
Yep.
And that bears on the notion, which I think you said, it's about our relationship with God. Mm-hmm. He opens that space for us. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
So then what is it? Yeah, I'm just going to try and attack the idea a little bit.
Yeah.
So what's it mean to be Christ-like then? Like then because I think a lot of I think, for better or for worse, a lot of frustration as for pastors comes from this idea that we need to make disciples who are Christ-like. That's the goal of flourishing.
Yeah.
Is to have Christ-like disciples of Jesus, and they need to get to that point. And then I think a lot of frustration comes when they're not anywhere close to that, or one or two got a glimpse of it, or I can start to see something happening in their life, but man, there's still so much dysfunction in relationship. But that sounds like a lot like a goal, is to get to Christ likeness. So you're not saying no, you shouldn't be moving towards that, because clearly that's a New Testament imperative, is this growth in holiness. As this is where my Wesleyanism is coming out. It's showing.
Yeah, bring it out. Yeah,
because a big doctrine would be entire sanctification. Mm-hmm. Some people think that's heretical. I don't think it is, but I haven't seen anyone express it. Where it's not that you're perfect, it's not that you're Jesus, it's just that God has so overcome your heart with his love that the desire to sin just isn't there. Willfully sin.
Yeah.
So that's a Wesleyan doctrine, perfected in love or entire sanctification.
Is there a way of turning that around, the language around? And I find this is what I found helpful, is to think about being human. And I mean, this is Irenaeus, isn't it? To be fully human. Christ is to be fully human. So that kind of notion of the new Adam, new creation. And so, I mean, that's quite a good question. What does that mean to be fully human? Be fully human. Because, when you said saying to be like Christ, well, it depends which parts you want to emphasize.
Yes, true. Yeah.
When you be human, there's a bit wider space here.
But to be human is to be like Christ, isn't it?
Well, it gets into that kind of question. I would want to push those two things together, as Jonathan and I have often talked about. To be Christian is to be truly human, but often what I don't see is that I'm Christian and it doesn't look like anything I'd want to be, because it doesn't look very human. It's not earth. It's kind of got it sort of distant and flaky.
Yeah. So where am I wrong? Because you're looking at me funny, Jonathan. People who are listening can't look at the really puzzled facial expressions that he has. But I feel like I'm projecting a notion that's within Christian evangelical culture. And I don't think I'm far off, because I've heard many people say exactly what I've just said. And I don't think I'm entirely wrong. And even if I go with the Dallas Willardian approach to Christian formation of a disciple of Jesus is living their life as if Jesus was living their life. Right. Where, Graham, you're a lecturer at a Christian college. If Jesus was living your life, how would he do that role? How would he live your life? Is what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, which moves us towards this idea of flourishing, and which is still very airy in the kind of just ethereal out there for some reason. So what am I getting something wrong within that formulation?
This is my personal take on this, is that I wonder if the language that we're using at the moment around we need to be more Christ-like, this is going to be controversial, I know it.
That's all right. Well, we got a long conversation, so we'll get it out of you.
This is going to be controversial. You need to be more Christ-like. All the things that you were just saying, nothing of that to me is wrong. Mm-hmm. Yet, to me, it's a huge barrier. I just see it as another thing that I'm never going to achieve. And to me, I feel like it puts a huge distance between my relationship with Jesus and this person of Jesus somewhere out there that I need to be like and I need to follow. And in fact, nothing of what you said is wrong, but I feel like if we just talk to people about loving God and coming into a relationship with God, that is following Jesus. That is being Christ-like. Yet the layer that we put upon that is this distant Jesus that we need to do everything, that we need to look exactly like him and be exactly like him. Where is that? It's just another rule that we need to follow. I just feel like there's a real barrier there, that it puts another barrier. And I think people are in such a mindset that they're going, where is this Christ? Where is this Jesus?
Also, what Jesus are you saying I have to be Christ-like towards is a good question.
Yeah,
I
can't.
Yeah.
Again, I'm really articulating this quite badly.
No, I think you're.
But
yeah.
Well, I mean,
there's. I mean, let's be like Jesus. Walk like Jesus, and become Christ-like.
Which is really hard to nail down, but and around this is also the language in Scripture about the imitation. So Paul says, "Imitate me as I may Christ."
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of stepping back from a little bit and thinking exactly what that actually means.
Exactly.
Because I'm not sure imitation means it's a robotic sort of, and that's what I think. I think that's what you're kind of pushing against, is the kind of robotism of robot. I kind of move like this. I don't think that's what it's about. I think, and that's why I like the language of. I like much more the language of the following of Christ to become truly human, because, I mean, so what does that mean? It's kind of, it is open.
Do you know what? Yeah, but when I hear follow Christ, it's see the world as Christ saw the world.
Right.
That is following Christ. That God is intimately involved in every part of your life. That is following Christ. What should we imitate about Paul? His missionary journey? Is that what he's asking us to get into? Well, let's find a boat and we'll go around the world.
I don't think
he's not asking that. He's asking us to take the eyes that he sees the world through, to participate and imitate that. That's what he's asking us to imitate. But yet so often we don't ask people to enter into those worlds. We just simply give them another rule. Gosh, guys, if you just did this, 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 and this. Yet we never give them the imagination of what the world looks like through a truly Christian lens. That's the imitation. That's what he's asking us to walk into.
Do you want to hear?
That's what I think. That's what I think. What do you think, man?
Well, I think we're all kind of feeling the same way. We have a different emphasis.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think some of it's rhetorical, and because I don't think we're very far off of each other. But
let's see if we can land in some kind of.
I'll add something to that.
Yeah, do it.
So we're just peeling. See, we start with flourishing, and now we're just layering it back and back and back, because this is what inevitably happens, I think. I've just finished reading a portion of Charles Taylor, Secular Age, around page 300. That's talking about this Nova effect that happened within culture, where there was a transition, an anthropological shift in the human person, where we believed in a transcendent theistic being of God, and then we moved into deism, and then we moved into a rejection of God as a society as a whole, into secular society, right? And because of that, he mentions how there's a negative space now in society, where we feel like there's transcendently, there's something missing. We can't put our fingers on it. Some people approach it differently, where they say, well, just ignore it. Really, we all ought to be fatalists, but that's not how we approach life anyway. Just live and die and let it be. Other people are like, no, I can't. I need to think of something greater and higher, so they stick back to their Christian tradition, which is obviously the case for many people. But then you have a large swath of people where I think it's infected everywhere, which he would argue, where they try and find the formulaic thing to kind of satisfy that transcendent desire that's within the human heart. So he says, because we're no longer on sacred time, we're more on secular time now, where we no longer see the world as like, not a cycle, because Christianity always was progressing towards somewhere, towards the second coming of Christ, new heavens, new earth. But within that, there was always a cycle of remembering our place in the story. But because of secular time, we've lost that rootedness as a society as a whole within that sacred time. So therefore, these normal stopping points of transcendence actually hold very little meaning for people, and they're always asking for that new thing. And now everybody, because of this advent of intense radical individualism, is trying to define what that thing is all for themselves, and to then find that connection of transcendence, or what they would say, oh, I feel like I've now figured it out. I figured the secret out, right? So there's a bunch of individuals out there claiming to have found the secret, the thing, for what life's all about. And I think as Christians, we know we've found that thing, but within that thing, we're trying to identify the thing that gets us even closer to the thing.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. It does, yeah.
So it's like, oh, well, really, don't you know, in order to really be a flourishing follower of Jesus, a flourishing Christian, you just need to do more spiritual practices.
Yeah.
If you just pray more and you worship more, have you ever incorporated silence and solitude into your devotional diet?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you just do more of that, then then it's going to unlock. You're gonna feel it.
Yeah.
Oh, have you ever served people, gone to a soup kitchen, connected with people? If you do more of that, and so I'm not rejecting those things.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is everything is couched as a solution to the problem.
Yeah.
That points you towards once you do that, that's it.
Yeah.
You found it. It's almost like we need to as humans arrive.
Yeah.
We need to arrive somewhere, and we're caught in this in between moment where we actually can't.
Yeah.
We always need to move. We always feel like there's dissonance, and there's not one silver bullet solution. And I think in different parts of Christian history, they understood that more than in our modern secular age, where we want that. That's why I say self-help. We want those silver bullet solutions to the problems.
Man, that's such a great unpacking of that, man. That's awesome, mate. I think that's so spot on. And I wonder if what you're getting at also, and see if this is right, and I think it's what I'm trying to get at, is that we tend to, the way that we use the word Jesus and follow Jesus, and we need to be more Christ-like, that it's another little solution that we pick up and just tag on to this huge background of culture that we never really deal with. This deep sense of transcendence, or that everyone seems to be after, or what Taylor calls the contested space. The secular space is a contested space. It's not without God, but now it's contested, that we could pick up God or not have God. So we often give people, follow Jesus. We need to be more Christ-like. Yet it never changes truly that background space that we're contesting in. That itself seems to be neutral, or it stays a secular background for many people, and I think many people in the church, and I think many for myself. And I think what I was trying to say with Paul is that what we need to be trying to do for people in churches, I think, is to radically deconstruct the background, their secular background. Because if that isn't changed, it doesn't matter who you follow. You're not imitating anyone but the culture. You're not seen with new eyes. You're not born again in all the New Testament language. That's my worry, and I think that's what I feel is the barrier that we give people. We simply give them another option. And we need to dig. We need to be going much deeper than that.
If I'm hearing you right, then this notion of, language.
Yeah.
So language is in this. So
yeah.
So when I would say, follow Jesus, it actually comes across as, I've heard that before and I know what that is and it's the thing.
Yeah.
So and I agree, because
Yeah.
I don't like cliches myself. In fact, they really annoy me.
Yeah.
Because I go, well, it's all assumed, but we don't really know what we're talking about. So are you saying that what we probably need to do in terms of kind of moving forward, it's far more nuanced. We actually have to ask, so what do you mean by that? Is that, or finding ways of saying that, or I can't, because what I'm thinking here is it's not another thing to do.
Yeah, that's right.
It's far more deeper than that.
Yeah, I think it's nuanced,
Yeah.
and I think it needs to be bolder. And I think it's both. I think we need to I think Christians need to unpack their language a lot more, but we need to be bolder in the world in two ways. Deconstructing the current worldview. I think we need to learn how to do that well, but then we need to know how to present not just another option, but a complete new way of seeing what life is about. If we're not doing that, the classic is when we talk about worldviews is we're not even touching the iceberg that sits under the water. We're just simply giving people new flags to plant on top of it. Mm-hmm. I've claimed this space when everything below is just the same. That's being born again. That's baptism. That's the deep hope that we've talked about a number of times. How do we get there? That's what I think. That's what Taylor's doing in his book. He is deconstructing the secular age. He takes you through it to see that the narrative that you thought you were part of is not the right. There's another narrative. There's another way to read this story. And I think we need to be showing people new ways to read the story of existence.
Yeah.
I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just keep on building on top of ruins.
You're an evangelist at heart.
I am. I am.
Unpack that. What would that look like, Jonathan?
To do it?
Yeah, to unravel it. But you're not. I know it's so easy to give propositions and to say this is a solution. This is a because we just talked about how we're so looking for the options to the solutions to figure out how to live a flourishing and fulfilling and meaningful life. Right? That's not what you're saying. You're saying the conversation is on a whole different field.
It's on a whole different field.
We're playing a game.
Yeah.
The game of secularism is on a football field.
Yeah.
We need to go to an ice hockey rink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where it moves super quick.
Yeah, it moves fast.
It's super quick, and you don't know where the puck's going.
Yeah.
But you got to move there anyway. So it's got to become in your bones.
And there's different rules to the game.
You just got to learn how to move in that kind of way. Now,
yeah.
You know, that's what. Yeah, exactly right.
Sorry. So, Graham, what did you ask of Jonathan?
Well, I was sort of thinking. I mean, I kind of go. I can hear where you're coming from. I kind of know, but then I'm going. Okay. I want to earth that in the life of our ordinary everyday going to church and the things that we do as we interact. What does that look like?
I think it looks like this. Funny enough, I think it looks like this.
Oh, like
what's this?
Yeah, no, it looks like this. I think it looks like the preacher getting up and saying, classically, this is what you thought life was about. And you've been toiling away. This is the classic Exodus narrative. We need to replay it out all the time because it never gets sick. We need to say you've been living under this, and can't you feel the weight of it? God has brought you out into a new way of life, and here's a new way to live this life. And then we have the Bible tells us a story over and over and over again. You've been sick. You've been under oppression. With all the things that you think, there's a new way to live. There's a new way to flourish. And we need to be continuously opening up that story.
Yeah, and it's a redefinition of flourishing as well.
It's a redefinition of flourishing. You thought it was this. It has never been that.
No. Because even
you go.
Because even within this conversation of flourishing, I think people are only thinking of the positives.
Right.
I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Take up your cross and follow me is flourishing.
Yeah.
You know, bearing the burden of another is flourishing.
Yep.
Being last is flourishing.
Yep.
You know, so those are all redefinitions of what flourishing is. We're not even I like that analogy. We're not even in the same field. We're not in the same pitch.
100%.
We're playing two different games.
And exactly what you just said, it's saying, oh, you thought that was success? Let me deconstruct why you thought that was success, and then let me tell you the good news of why that's not really success.
Yeah.
That's the kind of work we need to be doing. We need to be getting back to the ground the whole time, coming back to the background that people are living out of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best preachers, the best theologians are constantly doing that work. They're excavating, they're getting deep, 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 deep. Because if you can't get to the soil, you're never going to be able to plant something new. Ever.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we get like parables of sowing seeds, throwing them on rough ground. Only when it lands in the fresh soil will the roots go deep. But to get there, man, you got to deconstruct. You've got to take apart what the culture is giving us. You've got to keep on going down. You've got to keep on going down.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? What do you think?
Well, I'm trying to earth this in some experiences.
Yeah.
So yesterday I was at a pastor's
Yeah.
North Shore leaders thing,
Yeah.
and so different ones got up, 3 different ones got up, and it was quite funny because Richard's brother,
Right.
he's so comical because he's kind of got dry wit, but he says, hated these things, thought it was going to be, and he basically tells a story of that, like I'm not going to learn anything at this, but he said I've discovered that I stopped going for a while and I actually found I actually liked it. And I actually found that, and I can't really explain it, but I actually felt I need this.
Right.
So I think, and then I talked to somebody else after it. It was something in that space
Yeah.
of sharing, of connection.
Mm-hmm.
It, not just as a thing, but something. And it's very difficult to name what that is, but somehow we needed each other.
Right.
And and in that space, we realised that we needed each other.
Yeah.
And that we actually can't do it by ourselves. Or we can't, life doesn't happen in my solo little, little room,
Yep.
or my little group of people that I'm doing it. That actually, that somehow something unfolds in that space. Now, I think that's kind of it, but it's like there's no 1, 2, 3, or there's not a sort of here's a formula. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But the discovery of that we need each other was in that space, and I think that I was trying to earth that
Right.
in that experience, what you were talking about, in that experience of going the kind of conclusion that the culture says I don't really need this. I should spend my time better spent doing this.
Yeah.
This appears like to be a waste of time.
Yeah.
So what did we achieve? What was the outcome? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking about that, thinking about what you're saying about earthing it, and often we do jump to that. We say, okay, yeah, there's some great ideas there. There's some massive ideas, but let's earth it. I think there's 2 points that we always need to keep 2 things in tension. Yes, one is that we need to keep on earthing things, of course, to see them coming out. But on the other hand, I think this is what the church also needs to do, is to speak boldly and loudly about an imagination of a new world. Because I think so many people are dead to different ways of life, that there is a time for not earthing things, and there is a time for speaking broadly, imaginatively, and hopefully and courageously, that people, just to awaken people again to an opening in their kind of settled souls for something large and revolutionary, and you want it to burn in people. I think that is actually earthing it, and I think it awakens people to new ways of life, and it doesn't put, this again comes back to, it doesn't put an end goal to it. It actually opens people up to transcendence again. I think what we've lost is the preacher who's like, oh my goodness, we're involved in something massive, guys.
Because if I think about that space yesterday, and there were a few things in that space, I went, well, that was really cool. And then I was talking to a colleague this morning about, I might have something to say, but actually I don't even know until I've said it that it's become aware of that.
Yep.
And the same, that I was in this space yesterday, and then a couple of people said something, and I came alive to that.
Yep.
That wouldn't have been if it hadn't that space in it. And perhaps that when that person shared that, they also come alive to something they weren't even aware of
That's
either.
right. That's right.
And so in this space,
Yeah.
there's a dynamic going on in this space that somehow, well, it's mysterious, but
Yeah.
there's a sense of transcendence and beauty
Yeah.
and good
Yeah.
and truth about it,
Yeah.
actually.
I think that's
But you couldn't package it.
Yeah, totally. And I wonder if it comes back to like Timothy and Silas in jail. You know, they're in this very, you know, they're locked up. Then they start singing.
Yeah.
They're praising. And part of the preaching moment, I think, part of our moment as churches is to praise and preach in moments of hopelessness and ruin and hopeless. And when people are, you know, are oppressed, is to teach people how to pray and to praise again. Those moments, just as happens for Silas and Paul, the foundations shake again. Again, this is all poetic language. The foundations shake. We get back to the background ground that everyone's living out of. That shakes, and the doors are opened again. And again, the Spirit comes in, and people see it, and people's lives are turned. So it's that kind of language. It's that poetic moment of opening. It's
You ready for something?
yeah, do it, man. Otherwise, I'll just keep on preaching.
No, yeah, it's good. You both are awesome.
Dude, I'm so. You get me. You get me fired up. I mean, it's the preaching moment. I feel like that's the preaching moment.
Yeah, that is.
I'm like, man, how do we get back to the preaching?
Can I tell you
moment?
what the roadblock or the obstacle is to that?
Yeah, you should.
No, I'm not deflating you.
No,
it's just
deflate
the
it.
reality
Yeah.
is. Oh, it's on tip of my tongue. The flourishing is a well-ordered life. Pause. The stereotype of flourishing is a well-ordered, in control, if I'm Charles
wow.
Taylor, buffered self.
Wow, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're so right.
That's what flourishing is
No,
in
you're
a secular, even Christian secular society.
Oh man, you're right.
So,
Yeah.
but what you just described is out of control, is a lack of control. It's allowing more of an enchanted understanding of the world to enter into the present.
Oh, you're right.
Disenchanted
you're
world.
So right.
And if for people who are listening, disenchanted and enchanted is Charles Taylor language. We're not disciples of him, but we're just reading him a lot right now.
Joey is.
I am. Is language for the world was a very mysterious and enchanted place, and over the course of 500 years, it's now disenchanted and very controllable and malleable and manipulated. And we can even buffer ourselves against the spirits of the past because we're far beyond that. But what you just described is you're inviting that enchantment and that mystery and that transcendence back into the conversation. And to do that to somebody who is deeply secular, even if they're Christian, whether they know it or not, where Christianity, even within their heart, is just a choice, an option off a menu of many different ways of being in a world, is so foreign.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the hard soil message.
Yeah. I do.
That's a hard soil message.
Yeah.
You're not going to, like, you're getting pumped up saying that.
Yeah.
And I'm getting pumped up listening.
Yeah.
And Graham's got questions he wants to keep asking.
Yeah.
But that's a tough word.
It is.
Not intellectually, I'm like, if I was a Hindu, I'd be like, yeah, that's just one more god onto the pantheon.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's not what you're saying.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It's not.
That's right.
I
That's
get it.
right.
When you
That's
start
so good,
using-
Joey.
When you
So
start
good.
using the words control, I mean, I'm just
So
looking out the
good.
window here and I'm watching the wind blow, and I'm going, who rehearsed that?
Right.
It's just creation. It's moving. It's flowing. It's you know, I think sometimes we use words like control and out of control, and I sometimes think that really unhelpful when we speak about
Right.
God, because if we say, "Oh, God is in control," the flip side of that is to say, if you don't say that, God's out of control, and you think, I just don't think that's the right language. I just don't think that's doing anything for what we want to talk about here, because it's out of control. In control, it then becomes quite, the ordered, sort of structured, us controlling it, us pushing our point, and what we've missed out on is the Spirit in the space giving life and movement and dynamism. And particularly when you think about the other,
Yep.
I was just thinking before, those spaces, I'm now using the word, they're sacred spaces.
Yep.
They become, and it's actually only post that point you realise it was a sacred space. If you walk into it, we're going to make a sacred space. No, it doesn't. But it's after that moment, you go,
Yep.
what just happened then?
Yep.
That's profound.
I think you're right, man. This reminds me of the conversation we had just a little while ago, where we talked about. I think what we're talking about here also is that we are inviting people into something beautiful, that enchanted space. Wow, it stirs something in you. Wow, that's amazing. You guys see the world like that. That's what Christianity is about. Wow, how do I get involved with that? The good. How do I do that? How do I live like that? Well, let me tell you some things that you these things wouldn't be too good if you were, messing with your neighbor or something like that. Let me tell you the good, how to be involved in this beautiful space. And then, of course, it leads to the truth. Well, let me tell you why it's like this. And that's then, you bring the rational mind to that. Let me tell you how this all makes sense. Let me tell you how it fits together. Let me bring your logic to it. Wrestle with it. Ask questions of it. Great. But that always leads back to participation in the good. Mm. And that always should lead back to, man, we live in an enchanted world. And it's in a beautiful world. And it's a broken world. And if you get the interaction between the beautiful, the good, and the truth, man, that's the imitation of Christ. That's the imitation of Christ. That's the true follower of Christ, who is immersed in that world. Imitate me, because I am in that world. Don't just follow me in your world. Anyone can do that. Are you a follower or are you a disciple? That's, I think, the bedrock. What do you think? I don't know.
I just, when you said that, I just couldn't help think of the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come.
Yeah.
I've often thought of that. Oh yeah, God. So what's your kingdom? Is it I got to do this? And I, and then I reminded him in that particular of Matthew 6.
Yeah.
Jesus plays with the crowd because he gives these creation metaphors.
Yeah.
The lily of the field. It who feels the lily? It flourishes. It. Was the lily of the field. What was the other one? There's two creation metaphors, but he likens that.
Oh, like the bird's nest or something.
Yeah.
The bird's clothing.
There's
or whatever.
There's a kind of uncontrolled, and I don't want to use that word, but it's not about control and control. There's just a beauty.
There's a pattern.
Yeah.
There's a pattern. There's a way that the world functions well, and the way that the world doesn't function well.
Yeah.
One is not control or uncontrol, but one certainly leads to destruction. The other one certainly leads to flourishing, I think.
I mean, at the end of it goes, well, seek the king. Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things be added unto you. I mean, I think I often learned that Jesus is onto something here that I just can't quite grasp. It's not a kind of thing.
Exactly.
It's something to live in here. To live into.
Right. It's that live into, that participation.
Yeah.
The true imitation.
Yeah.
The true imitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not something that it's ethereal out there.
No.
It's, because often we do think about the kingdom of God, one day it'll all be right.
Yeah.
And, but it's kind of ends up drifts to kind of a utopianism or an idealism that we kind of frame, and then we just sort of bow to it all.
Yep.
Which doesn't then relate to a world that we're living in.
Yeah.
So I think where we've landed a little bit, obviously the conversation is still going on, is we began with flourishing, and we realized relatively quickly that there's different definitions of flourishing.
Yeah.
And what we just expressed now is actually to flourish as a human is not within the kind of secular worldview that you're in, because the Bible flips flourishing upside down on its head, actually places it within a whole different game and a whole different field.
Yeah.
Like you've just said.
Yeah,
it's thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Well, you're getting transferred from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of of the Father, Son,
Yep.
In the kingdom of light.
Yep.
So it's like those are two different playing fields.
Yeah.
And then so the practical bit here, kind of as we close, is how do you actually live? How do you live in the? I don't even use the word material. How do you live in this fallen, dark world that has lighthouses sprinkled throughout, of heaven on earth, but how do you live in this dark world when you need to be living like you're in a different world?
Great. That's such a good question.
And how do you flourish in that?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
We got to it.
We got to it.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Cool. That's great.